Hey, Kratom quitters, this is Libby, and this is the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. Today we are on episode 99, and I'm here with Jacob. We got a comment on a social media post that we posted about a Kratom quitter using Dharma recovery and medicated assisted therapy to get off of his Kratom addiction. And we had some interesting comments from some pro-Kratom people suggesting that we were prohibitionists, and we thought we would chat about that today.
Yeah, thanks, Libby. I think it's going to be an interesting chat. It also fits nicely with our guest interview. Charlie sat down with Travis, who goes by the Kratom Warrior on TikTok, and that's Kratom with an 8 instead of an A if you want to check out his stuff. We've been called prohibitionists before, despite many times and many clarifications on the podcast that personally neither Charlie, myself, I don't want to speak for you, Libby, but we're not prohibitionists. We are just simply creating a space and providing a forum for people to talk about a legitimate problem that accompanies this plant sometimes for some individuals that, happen to get addicted to it. So we're just purely out here doing that. Where I land on it is we should have regulations, I think, that make sense and have some better warnings for people so they don't unintentionally end up in Kratom addiction like some people have. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think for me, we're pretty open on the podcast about how we just want to support people. I can see both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
It's easy to be like, yeah, everyone just talking about quitting Kratom is just wanting to make it illegal. And we've been pretty clear on wanting to provide education being the most powerful form of empowerment. I feel like these people haven't even listened to one podcast episode. Like if you listen to like 5, you get a bunch of different opinions, and ways to go about it.
Yeah, I agree. I would be surprised if many of the people making these comments have listened. But I also agree with you too. I don't personally think Kratom is a bad plant or a terrible thing. It is what it is. It's a thing. It's a substance. I have no control over it. If someone wants to and can use that in a manner that is non-addictive and it works for whatever ailment they believe it works for, who am I to say that they should not be able to do that and that's wrong? I don't care at all. That's your own personal decision. And if you're getting benefit out of something, that's for you to decide, not for me. So that's an odd comment. The Suboxone one is always interesting too, because there's a lot of people that really have this strong opinion that it's way worse than Kratom and should never ever be used for Kratom addiction. Our standpoint on the podcast is everybody's journey is different, and whatever works for some people may not work for others, and that's an individual decision that you have to make. But for me, I personally believe that medication-assisted treatment is way better than using Kratom as a form of medicated-assisted treatment on your own, because you're receiving care from medical professionals. You're oftentimes, in my opinion, should be pairing it with therapy and typical recovery work. And in addition to that, it breaks the habit of, having to take Kratom 10 times a day or however many times because you're addicted to it. And it often doesn't do anything for people other than relieve cravings and withdrawal. So that's my personal opinion. The thinly veiled comment that that's somehow worse than Kratom addiction is not correct.
There's a lot of research that needs to be done into the plant. So from things that I've seen and stories that I've heard, many of which from this podcast, having been on Suboxone in the past and having been addicted to heavier opiates in the past, quote unquote, heavier opiates, I don't know that that's true. Like my Kratom addiction it looked much worse than my heroin addiction, So
yeah.
We don't have enough information about it to really be able to tell. And I think that lumping Suboxone into a category of like for heroin or for
fentanyl,
yeah.
Yes.
It makes it sound like, Kratom's not that bad. Why would you use this big bad drug to combat a Kratom addiction? That's meant for bigger opiates. But I believe that Kratom addiction is just as bad. I think it might be even worse in some ways because it's attacking multiple receptor sites, not just opioid receptors. So I think there's a real lack of awareness, education, and research. It's easy to be one-sided, when you're trying to defend something that you hold near and dear.
Yeah, I certainly can understand whether I agree with it or not is another thing, but I could certainly understand the response to want to defend something that you maybe feel is threatened or your access to is threatened. But I assure you, we're not. I don't think we're the problem. I don't think people talking about the addictive nature of Kratom would be the thing that gets it banned. I think the consequences of the current marketplace we have with Kratom may be what ultimately leads to it getting banned, with lack of regulation and marketing practices that are deceptive sometimes in some cases, and just general lack of any oversight or any regulation in that market, or very limited, at least. I think if anything, that's what'll happen. You don't see Budweiser going to AA and saying you guys are threatening our product or people's access to our product. It's just it's a consequence, and again, not advocating for a ban or anything, but I don't know. It's an interesting topic. I'm kind of glad that we get comments like this from time to time, because it gives us the ability to talk about it a little bit.
I wanted to circle back around because you said something about the regulation about it all. And I think that that's been the loudest voice of most of us on the podcast, is just like wanting to call for regulation, because just like you said, all of these mislabeled products and misleading products that are really, people are getting addicted and they don't even know what they're consuming is addictive, and that's the problem, is that there's not, like I said, education and information available that should be available. So like when you're prescribed Percocet, you know that it's addictive. Yep. Most doctors will tell you. So I think it's only fair that should be common knowledge and displayed on the marketing.
Yeah, I agree. Because the people that want to do it will still do it. The people that don't necessarily know the risk they're taking and want to opt out of that risk have the ability to, because they know. But now it's like you have to fish through information, some of which you have to make the determination of if it's accurate or not, and that leads to a lot of situations we see now. Anyways, we could probably talk about this all day, but I'm sure the listeners would much rather get on to the interview between Charlie and Travis, so we'll do that now.
Perfect.
Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Charlie, and I'm with Travis this week, and he's known as Kratom Warrior on TikTok. And many people suggested that we get him on as a guest, and I'm very grateful to have him today. So, Travis, introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey guys, I'm Travis, better known as on TikTok as Kratom Warrior. I had a bout with Kratom, a really, really crazy experience. I kind of just spend my time, on these social platforms, really spreading awareness, because I feel like there is a huge gap of knowledge when it comes to Kratom.
Thanks. And just any basics about your age, what part of the country, what you do for a living, you can talk about in generalities.
Okay, I'm 34. I live in Tampa, Florida. I spend, most of my time now just hanging out with my wife, kind of enjoying the bay when we're not getting hit by a hurricane. I'm a leasing agent. My work days include, dealing with a luxury apartment complex and everything that goes in with that. Pretty demanding, so people will notice that I do take a lot of breaks, just because it can be a lot handling social media account and my demanding job. And being a husband and a father, it can get overwhelming, but yeah, so.
When did you quit Kratom?
I quit Kratom May 3rd.
All right. When were you introduced to Kratom, and what did that look like?
It was about 2.5 years ago. It's all kind of a fog now. It didn't start as an everyday thing, but I really struggled with alcohol. That was probably my drug of choice. That and Adderall. I do have ADHD, so I was prescribed that, and I was kind of mixing the two. I eventually got to a point in my life where I had to make a stand for myself, and my life was getting crazy, and that's when I heard about Kratom. And in the Tampa Bay area, I don't know if it's in every state, but there's tea shops on every corner. Because when it came to drinking, I enjoyed sitting down at a bar. I enjoyed meeting strangers and having conversations that I would have never had if I wasn't there. And it's almost like the camaraderie of being in that place. And I found that in the Kratom bar. It was a really easy switch. And, that's where a lot of my anger comes in, because there are so many newcomers. There is a a lack of knowledge and awareness on this, where people are getting into this, not realizing what they're getting into. And nobody tells them ahead of time, hey, be careful. This is something that this has a rabbit hole like any other substance. And this is where it starts. So you don't want to find yourself going from the tea powders. You don't want to find yourself from the powders to the shots, or even worse, to the tablets. So it's something that I think really needs, awareness is so important on this, especially with the new generation who drinks less than any other generation in the world. So it worries me. I have a fear that kind of creeps up my spine a little bit on the lack of knowledge, the lack of awareness, and how many people truly believe that there isn't a dark side to Kratom.
Yeah, we're totally aligned with that mission. That's sort of what the podcast is about. So are you sober from alcohol now?
I do drink from time to time now. I mean, I would say probably like once, if not maybe twice a month. But I was, in my worst days, I was drinking, blacking out 4 to 5 times, 6 times a week. If there is a good side to Kratom, it's that it beat the living hell out of me, where I'm terrified of losing my body, terrified of losing control. So in a way, it kind of beat the addiction out of me. In my brain, it did, in my point of view, because the way I operate now is so much different. And it comes from this underlying fear of remembering what it felt like to be truly out of control of your emotions, out of control of your own body, out of control of everything. And I could never get drunk again. This is not going to happen. I'm terrified, to be honest with you.
How did your Kratom use progress, and how did it escalate over time?
It started with the tea. It was something that I don't know if you've drank the tea before, but that's something your body really builds tolerance on quickly. I mean, your body builds tolerance in general with Kratom quickly, but those teas, man, it's really quick. In a week or two, you don't feel that 16-ounce drink at all anymore, so it's like that's where it kind of got to, where I was drinking 32, 64 ounces of tea. And I don't know if you've ever bought one of those, but that's about $40 and doing that twice a day, it just got so expensive. And my wife's like, dude, you've kicked alcohol, but you're not buying bottles by the day or every other day anymore. But hey, the money's still draining out of the account with these teas. And I was like, man, and I'm really not even feeling it. Like, what am I wasting my money on? But I didn't notice at that time, to be honest, I didn't notice a dependency yet. I noticed maybe it was like a more of a mental, like calming. I did notice, like, when I didn't have it, I was a little more irritable. I wasn't fulfilled, but like that definition of relief, or that need for relief, wasn't really there fully yet. I noticed, well, eventually I did a little research and found out that the smoke shops sell powder. And I was like, well, shoot, I can start brewing my own tea, start saving money. And that's how that started. I started brewing tea, and I got into like learning how to mix, honey, and, I'm, doing what I can to make it taste good. And it got down to where eventually that wasn't working. And then the rabbit hole began of, well, what if I just eat the powder? And before I knew it, that chase never ended. Because I really enjoyed the euphoria. And like so many people I have arguments or conversations with, is like I felt like I found the answer. And it was in that euphoria. It was in that energy. It was in that youthful feeling of, I'm 18 again. I can drink a little bit of this in the morning. I pop straight up. I'm at work. I enjoy work. It's this bait and hook technique where you and it is so fleeting. It's something that it runs from you as fast as you can chase it. I never really got to the K shots. Thank God. I did try them once, but at the time that I tried them, I was so deep in my dependency that I was noticing withdrawals every 3 or 4 hours with powder. And with the K shots, it was quicker. That half-life was even shorter. It was like an hour or two. And I was like, dude, at that price, there's no way. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I noticed, eventually I went from 5-10 grams a day to eating 30-40 grams a day, and before I knew it, I was over 100 grams a day. I was eating 4 or 5 ounces a day, not all at once, but it was something that I would go get a brisk lemonade tea, and I'd dump an ounce in, and I basically had almost drank the whole ounce and a half in that 1 liter or whatever. I think it's like a liter bottle. It was just after lunch, and I was gonna I remember mixing up another one, and by the end of the day, Because then you get to the end of the day where you're like, oh man, I'm tired, but I need a dose. And then you dose and you get that energy again at 9 o'clock, and then you're up till 1. So it was something I just constantly did all day long. I was going through those 8-ounce bags like it was nothing.
Wow. I think the bar scene in Florida is unique. There's some other cities that might replicate it a little bit, but Florida is definitely unique there. So I've never sat down at a Kratom kava bar, and I have never actually literally drank one of the teas. I do understand that they're much more mild, and it's really easy to build tolerance to them. And just by the fact that your body can only take so much fluid, so it does kind of make it a little bit safer because it's milder and you can only consume so much fluid. But
correct.
Personally, I started off at the vape shops, and for a couple of months I did the extract pills, and then the coating on those pills upset my stomach, so I was throwing up constantly. So I graduated to the Kratom extract shots. We've talked to a lot of people on the podcast that have drank the teas and powder users, but the one thing I could relate to was the euphoria and like, oh, it's a miracle. It was all good. It solved all my problems physically, mentally. It was for a period of time. It made my life a lot better, but the benefits start going down. The tolerance starts going up. And like you said, it's very fleeting. I hadn't consumed much of the marketing because I hadn't experienced Kratom online. So I didn't have, I just kind of went naively into a vape shop. So it probably also relate to the money. Yeah, the money is probably the first thing many of us, we're just spending way more money. Did you start having physical side effects?
Yeah, so I would say right around the ½ ounce to 1 ounce a day mark is when, especially in the mornings, it was like dose vomit. And people say all the time, like, oh, there's no way you could be taking that much because you would just get sick and vomit. And I'm like, man, like, you telling an addict that he can't find a way to get what he wants? Because as soon as I would get sick, I would just redose that shit again. There was no need. Like, it didn't matter if I threw up 3 times in a row. Like, I needed that dose, and I did. Over time, in use became horrible. My hands would get shaky. My eyes would be so pinhole, and I found out that's called nystagmus or nystag. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's where your eyes vibrate violently, rapidly, almost like REM sleep, but you're awake. And your eyes get very blurry. And I talk all the time about, like, I felt like a chameleon. Like, I couldn't focus my eyes in on something. It's almost like I was cross-eyed opposite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was this, like I would feel like I remember relating the feeling to, like, a carnival ride or, like, reading in the car for too long. It's not that I was always sick, but I always lived in nausea. Like, at that point, that was right around the 1 ounce to 2 ounce a day mark, where it was just really, really bad. And I don't know if that's the borderline where, when my hands were shaking, if that, was how close I was to the seizure zone. I don't really totally know. I'm still working on that with my own crowdsourcing on my page, having conversations with people who did have seizures. What were their in-use problems? How much were they taking? But I noticed as soon as, like, that 3-hour mark come and pass, full body sweat. You know what I mean? And I thought I had anxiety. I thought that I knew what panic attacks were. I thought that I was an anxious person, but I was taught really quickly that I had no idea what a panic attack was, because when that 3-hour mark passes, your entire anxiety center is lit up like the 4th of July. My anxiety center would light up. I don't know if everybody's always has that. I do hear some people say that they didn't really get the anxiety too bad, but for me, at least in my dosage and how much I was using, it was like Freddy Krueger was chasing. It was the worst feeling I've ever felt, and that's what kept me from not stopping, was that feeling, that chase. And when I did eventually quit, that was one of the first things that actually falls off. About 3 or 4 hours after that feeling starts, for me, it fell off. And I was like, oh, maybe there isn't withdrawals, like, oh, okay. Then about 12 hours later, that's when it all kicks in. It's like, it was horrible, from vomiting to, from, almost like the flu, like sneezing, yawning, chronic fatigue. It felt like I was hooked up to a car battery. Like this tingling feeling across my body, especially when I went to bed. Like this, I would tell my wife when I initially cut cold turkey. I cut red Bali. I was on the hard powder and felt like somebody had put a positive and a negative in the gas cheek. My legs were just like being electrocuted. And I was like, there's no way I'm sleeping. There's just no possible way. Eventually I tapered though. So
okay.
I switched to green and I tapered down about a gram or two every 2 or 3 days and found myself at a 5 to 10 gram mark and quit from there. But it wasn't like I avoided any of the withdrawal symptoms that people talk about all the time, but the intensity was definitely less. Like it wasn't like jumping off the ledge of red Bali at 4 or 5, 6 ounces a day. That was hell on earth.
Yeah, even if you can do a rapid taper, going cold turkey from your highest dose is usually hard. Before you did your final quit, and I would love to quiz you a little bit about your taper, but did you try to quit multiple times before you finally got to your final quit?
Yes. Because I kept trying to jump as I went down. Like I tell people all the time, I kind of just throw a blanket like statement out there, like, oh, 1 to 2 grams every couple of days. That's what I did. I tell people that to help them understand what a taper is. I'm blown away about how many people don't even know what taper. I mean, I didn't know what taper. I mean, as crazy as it is, and I'm not trying to say AI won't kill us one day, but I mean, AI is what told me how to get off of this. I mean, out of a desperation, I asked AI, and AI's like, dude, you got a taper. And I was like, okay. And it kind of gave me a taper plan, and I was like, all right. But yeah, I felt it out. It was something that I was like, ooh, like, okay, I'm going to try to cut, some days I could cut more than 3 or 4 grams. Other days I couldn't cut at all. So it was really, I used my anxiety and that panic attack feeling kind of as like my guide, and I worked myself down. I think of it as like a 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, trying to just work myself like tiptoe down the mountain of dosage as quickly as it would let me.
Okay. Was there any final straw that preceded your big quit, that like just some kind of bottom?
Yeah, it was the inability to sleep through the night. No doubt. Like every 3 or 4 hours I had to dose, and it didn't matter if I was sleeping.
Yeah.
It would wake me up out of a dead sleep, like a panic attack, and that anxiety, that panic would be sitting on my chest, and I was like, this is it. Like, I've got to get off of this stuff. I miss 8 hours. I miss not having to get up, and then sometimes I'd be like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in there puking because it's been so long since I've dosed. Because typically throughout the day, I would kind of microdose. Even though it was a lot, I wasn't doing a lot at once. It was just a very constant thing that I just constantly drank. In the morning and in the middle of the night was the longest I would go without a dose. And that's where it just would, a horrible feeling. I'll never forget.
Yeah. It's, in the end, what was your grams per day?
In the end, I want to say, I don't remember exactly because I was weighing everything as I worked myself down. But when I got down to the end, I got a lot more confident. I would say I had to have been somewhere between the 5 to 10 mark. So I would say 7 would be a good, 7 to 8 grams would be a good guess.
Oh, that's where you jumped off?
Correct.
Okay. And what was your highest peak amount that you were taking?
I would finish like an 8-ounce bag in like a day and a half.
Got it. So just reflecting back on your taper and going from 8 ounces per day down to jumping from like 7 grams. If somebody was in that situation with your experience now, do you have any recommendations of how to handle a taper like that?
I would just say it's like you just have to figure out, because my taper plan isn't going to work for everybody's taper. And it seems like taper plans they're like snowflakes. They're so unique in every way, shape, or form because we are so unique. We all think we're super different. In a lot of ways we are, in a lot of the ways we're same. But this is something that we're not the same in. This is something that really exposes us humans in a different way. And that taper plan is I always tell people start slow. Like that's how, because you want to start that taper slowly, in my opinion, because you want to kind of test the boundaries of what is your body going to let you get away of, like how quickly can you sneak? Maybe a rapid taper would work for you. It didn't work for me. I mean, I had to walk it back so slowly. My my job at the time, and I couldn't like live in an anxiety, and it would give me this like, just like I'm jumping, like I'm skydiving. You know what I mean? I would get this like anxiety peak, so I had to walk it back very slowly. But I always tell people, start slow. Figure out what you can get away with, because everybody gets away with something differently. So
got it.
Kind of test the boundaries and see what your body will let you do.
And one last question about your taper. From when you were at your peak to when you jumped, how much time was that?
I would say it was just shy of like 4 months.
Okay.
As I went down, I started picking up speed as I started really slowly, because I felt like at first it noticed even the smallest bit, but it's like my body got used to it dropping, and I was able to pick up speed as time passed.
How did the first 30 days go being kratom free?
Horrible diarrhea. That's one that, I mean, I didn't have a regular bowel movement until day 14. So that was something that to me really sucked.
Yeah.
I always tell people it's like with a chronic fatigue coupled with like that anhedonia that comes with it, that lack of love, lack of the inability to experience pleasure, coupled with that chronic fatigue, it's like a makeshift depression. So it's a full. I mean, I was like, what am I sad about? And I was like, this has to be the detox still, because after the main withdrawals, which were bad, don't get me wrong, but I can understand why people go back to this, 10, 15, 30, 45, 90 days later, because they think, oh, well, this is why I was taking it. Like, I'm crazy. I can't even have fun. I can't enjoy anything in life. And they're not giving their body time to fully detox this plant, because I didn't start noticing energy again till like around day 60. And I didn't start noticing, I had an hour of, I was happy. I was happy for an hour today. I mean, that was around like 80 days. So, I mean, not to get off topic of the 30-day stuff, but I mean, my first 30 days was really tough. It was like a deep, dark depression. So, I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah. When did sleep get a little bit more normal?
I would say after like the first week. I mean, it started getting back to a good rhythm. I mean, after day 4, day 5, when like the physical was like truly over, I started sleeping. But I was also taking a lot of just vitamins, things that I had researched on YouTube to help me with sleep. So at the time I was on, magnesiums and L-theanine and ashwagandha. I mean, anything that I could find in a grocery store that would help a little bit, I was using it. I mean, there's somebody now that it's on TikTok called Quit K that he did all the research, and you can buy AM and PM things that help you, versus spending hundreds of dollars at the vitamin store and then you're left over with all this stuff. And I think
we've had Emily on. She told her story quitting once, and then she also came on a second time to talk about that product. So we're happy to hear testimonials for it. Beyond the supplements and the Quick K product, was there anything that helped you withstand your withdrawals that helped tone those down?
I was drinking water like it was going out of style. I don't know if that was just like, that's something I've also noticed. People who have had better, like they're on their second, third, fourth quit, and they're like, man, this time around, I did a lot. I exercised more, and I drank a lot of water, and I felt better. And I've kind of compared that feeling that you get in your legs that keep you up at night, which is, I would say, probably the worst part of the detox is those restless legs and not being able to get any sleep for days upon days. I remember this short story, but I remember when I was a kid, me and my family went up to Colorado and we did snow skiing. And like by day 4, day 5 up there, I wasn't drinking any water. I'm from Florida. And so I only drink water when I'm hot. And I wasn't hot up in the Colorado mountains, so I just didn't even drink water at all. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and it was like my legs were in a cramp, just like completely dehydrated. And I drank 2 bottles of water and they went away. So I feel like we underestimate how dehydrated Kratom truly makes you. And I think the more dehydrated you are, the more you're going to feel these. I mean, the more intensity, depending on your dosage, depending on how long you've been using it, height, weight, I mean, everything. There's a lot of factors that can be put in to this to make, different intensity levels. But I really think water is in exercise, but really water is a huge factor in getting your body ready to quit.
Yeah, I agree. Well, when did you decide and why to go on TikTok and talk about this experience and your quitting journey?
Okay, so I don't know. Have you heard of LA Turtle?
No, I haven't.
He's been on YouTube and Instagram and stuff for a long time, and he's just a comedian guy, and he does funny videos, and he's always been a goofball. But he came out and told everybody that he was actually an alcoholic, and he started making videos to remind. And in the moment when he was feeling urges, he started making these videos to remind himself, how bad it can get. And whenever he would have an urge, he admitted to going back and watching those videos and reminding himself so that he never went back if he forgot. Because as humans, we forget so easily.
Yeah.
That's how it started. I got the idea from him. I was like, man, that's a really good idea. I can just make a couple videos and remind myself, like, hey, Trav, like, this is how bad it gets. Like, and that's, if you scroll, I mean, it won't take too long, but I mean, I've only got a couple hundred videos, but if you scroll to the bottom of my page, you see, like, I admit, like, I would love to have a community, but a lot of it was just me talking to myself. It was me, like, going, like, hey, like, this is bad. This is what you're feeling. This is how you're feeling. Don't go back to this. And then it was like the feedback that I got was so polarized. It was so, yeah, I had on one hand people cursing me out, telling me that I'm a liar and, Big Pharma is paying me and all these just crazy, absurd things, telling me that I bet you get withdrawals from weed and just being nasty. And I'm like, my God. And then on the other hand, you had people going, dude, I'm going through the same thing right now. Oh my God. Like, I thought I was the only one. I was, and I was like, dude, there is a gap. I knew right away. I was like, there is a huge hole missing in information. If there's people just come on, I mean, not to get political or anything, but it's like politics. It's like, or like how people's opinion on abortion. I mean, you got people spewing hatred at each other on both sides of the pole. I mean, it's crazy. It's up to me. And so I knew then and there, I was like, I'm going to stand up for what I know is right. I'm going to stand up for, I went through this and I experienced this. It's helping people. And I'm going to be, if anything, a beacon of hope to people who are trying to quit and want, because I mean, I get dozens of comments and direct messages a day of like, hey, what did you do? And it's like, well, even if I don't post videos, if I can keep that connection going and helping other people, I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Yes, that's great. And, TikTok reaches a different type of audience than a podcast like this, but we started this for similar reasons. I had the same experience. I just started a Twitter account and I just was using it for like a day counter, like I'm 2 days off of Kratom, 3 days. And I didn't even have, it was all hatred. There was no, at first I didn't get anybody that was struggling, and it took me a while to figure it out. I mean, people are different. I think some people, when they take Kratom, they experience it very mildly, and their body doesn't have much of a tolerance, and they don't get withdrawals from it. I think that is the case. But the other half of it is because of the legal status of it, and I think this is wrongheaded, and it's a little bit of a group think. It's almost cult. I hate to use this. It's almost cult-like. Among the Kratom advocates, they just want the Kratom to be legal. So they think that if they have this big, and it's somewhat unconscious. There's not like somebody in a back room plotting this, but they're just involved in this like large gaslighting operation. If they tell everybody that the withdrawals aren't real and that's all your fault, that it will somehow make it so. It's just ridiculous.
I think for a long time it's worked. Like I noticed the accounts who have spoken up on TikTok and stuff have been bullied right off. I see the videos where they've changed their platform completely because, dude, the harassment that I get. I mean, I'm not trying to paint myself as a victim, but if I wasn't so hard-headed, I say to myself all the time, any normal person would be like, fuck this, I'm done. And I've even been contacted by like Sexton Space and all these other like recovery pages. And they're like, dude, you can't speak about Kratom like that because, it's going to push it, it's going to push it into a ban. So you're right. You are dead on. That's exactly what's happening. And even the recovery pages, the more like generalized recovery from all addictions, they speak about that. And they've kind of come down on me and been like, oh, I remember my first 90 days, like you acting like you know everything. And I'm like, dude, I'm not acting like I know everything. No one owns me. The only thing that owns me is the truth. And I'm sorry that, you don't want this being spoken about, but we can't hide the risks of Kratom just for your own selfish gain, just so that because it helps you. And also, like, to go off your other point about 99% of the people, because that's something I would say the thing that I say the most on my page is, how much were you taking? I probably ask that 100 times a month because everybody's experience is different. So I try to shine the light on dosages because I think that is a huge factor. And 99% of the time, people who say they experienced no withdrawals were taking 3, 4, 5 grams a day. So they're barely taking this plant, coming onto a recovery page or an awareness page or whatever. There's all kinds of Kratom pages out there, and acting like they are. There's czars, they're the kings, they're the masters of dependence. And it's like, dude, you were barely taking it. How can you even feel like you are in the right space at all to even have an opinion?
Yeah.
Like, congratulations, you're not an addict. Are you going to walk into an AA meeting and tell those people that are in the Alcoholics Anonymous that, hey, it's your fault. It's not alcohol's fault. Like, if you weren't, you quit making alcohol look bad, I can enjoy it on the weekend. Like, dude, so sick. It's a sick mindset.
Yeah. I call it don't snitch on Kratom.
That's good.
And Kratom can be a viable harm reduction option for some people. It's definitely way better than buying drugs off the streets. It's safer than fentanyl, but there's a bunch of risks to it, and it can be extremely addictive. So
yeah, I say all the time, people say, oh, what do you want us to do? Go buy fent? I say, just because it's safer than fent doesn't make it safe.
Yes.
Like, we are talking about the worst thing out there, and you're saying, well, it's safer than fent. And it's like, dude, there's a million things that are deadly that are safer than fent. Like, Jesus, I don't know. Anyways.
What is the size of your TikTok account? I haven't4,500, but like, how many people are you reaching?
About 3,500 followers. I started 4 months ago, so it's kind of taken off the past month. But I mean, I've got several videos that are above. I would say probably a dozen videos that are above 50,000 views now. It seems like every week I'm getting 20, 30, 40,000 views, which is great. And I get a lot of feedback on those videos. I mean, I think that's really where those views come from, is people reading those comments, which is what I want them to do. Why I respond to 99% of my comments. I take that time and I go through the comments to really address the hatred, to really address the awareness, and to make sure that the line of truth is continuing, because a lot of people don't speak up. A lot of people are just watching. And it's so important to me to ask people who have comments, whether I experienced really bad withdrawals, I say, how much are you taking? Or I didn't experience any withdrawals at all. I'm like, well, how much were you taking? Because people need to know.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're out there. It's kind of like hand-to-hand combat. The podcast, we're happy with the people that listen to it, but it's a static sort of, interaction with the audience, where TikTok is much more personal and one-on-one. So
there's a lot of people out there reaching out. I mean, I think what you're doing is great. I think putting a platform where people can come out and talk about this in a safe space is really awesome. Because it's like you said, Operation, what was it? Lie about Kratom. What'd you say?
I call it don't snitch on Kratom.
Don't snitch on Kratom, man. I mean, that's what they're doing. It's like they've all gotten together somewhere, however many of them, million of them, and they're like, all right, what we need to do is we need to call anybody who says anything bad about Kratom a big pharma bot, and it's just, I don't know. But what's really funny is a lot of them disagree on so much. Like, you notice the people who have struggled with Kratom, they all say the same thing. They all say the same withdrawals. They all say similar dosages. We agree on everything. And then the people who think that Kratom is like the best, I see them. They argue with each other in my comments. They call each other liars. It cracks me up. Even though they're out to discredit us, they do a really good job discrediting themselves.
I have said many times, I do not think Kratom should be illegal. I don't want any American in jail, even overnight, for possession of Kratom. And
Sure.
And I do agree, like, having an interaction with the police is probably a more harmful risk than interacting with Kratom. But we have to have both. It's a multifaceted issue, and we can't sacrifice the general public to keep this legal. You have a big industry. The industry should have a more moderate stance to acknowledge the risks. And part of it's just informing customers. There's a lot of young people that are getting exposed to this and they just have no clue. I was kind of blindsided by, like, wow, because I personally found it harder to quit Kratom than drinking. And I thought the withdrawals were a little bit worse, but that was just personally. And this was something I bought at a vape shop,
Right.
I had never been dope sick before. So I know people that have been truly dope sick from heroin or even Suboxone.
I have, thousands of commenters that say, dude, like, I've been on opiates. Applications of Kratom, like the K shots and the tabs, they're like, it's almost identical.
Yes.
And I'm like, and then you got people going, oh no, you never really did it. And then I ask them, well, how much were you taking? They're like 10 grams a day. I'm like, dude, it's just, I just don't understand it. But I've never called for a ban. I don't think a ban is going to solve anything. I don't think putting people in jail is going to solve anything. It never does. But here in my state of Florida, they have weed in dispensaries, and I'm like, man, that could be personally, I don't think weed should be in a dispensary. I think that's not something that should be behind any bars, in my opinion. But man, what a great avenue for Kratom, where people can truly get, if they need, help, if there is a medicinal, maybe we can actually get some funding for some research. We can get, people involved. Doctors could track people's pre-existing conditions. They could get their height, their weight. They could see how much they're dosing and, cut them off if they know, hey, man, you're really starting to ramp up dosage. And so I think a dispensary would be a great avenue for Kratom.
Yeah, I think that's somewhere what I'm thinking too, especially if some kind of screening process where they look at what other meds you're on, your pre-existing conditions and things like that. And especially make some of the more higher dose products be way more restricted, like this, having 7-OH tablets sold on the corner, that's like having a real opiate.
But then, and you'd also be able to, like, before they could go buy Kratom, they could speak to a doctor and the doctor could go, hey, just so you know, stuff's depend. Like that moment in time that we all wish that we had as Kratom users, where somebody would have warned us before we got too deep in, we could guarantee that.
Where there's some social signals, there's nothing signifying that Kratom is a risk. It's the opposite, where it's being both marketed as safe and no big deal, and where there's all this big consumer base that say the same thing, in the effort to keep it legal. But, well, let's reset gears here. And now that you've been off Kratom since May, what are you doing to, like, it sounds like your TikTok is one of your big tools, but what else are you doing to, prevent relapse?
To be honest with you, I don't know if I have any real measures in place. I mean, I did, I think I kind of got some natural bumper rails, if you want to call them, where as soon as I quit, my child was born. As soon as I quit, I got this great job as a luxury leasing agent, and the bills are finally getting paid. And I met a guy on my my leasing team that his dad owns a bunch of property, and he was able to get us a house for a pretty fair deal. And it's like all the puzzles that I've been hoping for, all the pieces fell into place. And I was like, I think that's what keeps me away from that. That's what keeps me from falling into alcoholism. That's what keeps me from sitting around smoking weed all day or getting back to Kratom is I don't want to lose it. I'm terrified. I'm terrified to go back to the way my life was just 4 months ago. And it's not far away enough to scare the living shit out of me. It does every day. But
those are all great things, and I'm a little bit older than you, but so I'll give some advice from an old man to a younger man. I was sober 2 years, and I got married. I bought a house. We got a kid. I started a business, and those were all like awesome things, and they kept me sober. But I did after like 12 years, I did return to a drink. So it is possible, like, eventually those great things that are happening in your life might not be the guardrails forever, but I'm sure that you're safe when you have a baby. There's just something in your consciousness that takes you up to be hyper responsible.
Okay.
But how is your life going today?
It's going a lot better. Like, I don't want people to think like they have to. I consider myself lucky in the situation where I had a child on the way, and I was like, I'm going to be there for him, and I got this job opportunity, and I was like, I can't let this down. There was a lot of pieces that like really pushed me and gave me that extra boost, and I don't want people to think that you need all of that in your life to be able to quit, or you need that push, because I'm telling you, just job aside, child aside, like new place aside, like my new home, besides all of that, like internally, there is such a big change. Like, it is worth it just not being done with that chase, being done with that constant running, being done without dumping money out the window, being done with that dark place that it puts you on a daily basis. Like, that alone is worth it. And so many people ask me, like, is it worth it? Is it truly worth it? And I tell them, oh my God, 100 times I would do it over and over and over. It is so worth quitting. There is light on the other side of the dark forest. It's a walk and it's a push to get through that dark forest. But I'm telling you, there is light and the sun is warm on the other side. It is beyond worth it.
That's a wonderful message. But we're starting to get towards the end, and we like to ask some personal questions about some of your favorite things. What kind of music do you listen to?
Man, I listen to it all. It depends on if I'm missing my dad. I like to put on like 80s, hair metal. If I'm feeling myself or just want to have like a good time, I really do enjoy like just regular metal, and like even like EDM. I do enjoy but I mean, I would say if I had to vote, I had to get rid of all music. I had to vote. It would be like, your Blink-182, your Paramore, like all those bands that as cheesy as it is, like Green Day, the bands that were popular when I was in high school.
Yeah. Were you an Oasis fan? I hear they're coming back.
Yes. Oh my God. I love Oasis. Yep. I love it all. I love all that kind of music.
Asking this somebody with a child under 1 is kind of an oxymoron, but I still will go for it. Do you have any hobbies that you are returning to because you're off the Kratom and you have more attention?
Yeah, I would say when I do get time, I mean, I do skateboard. I do. I've made a couple trips across the state to the East Coast to go surfing since I've been sober. That's about right now. My hobby is my family and my job. So, but I do get away sometimes and to do the stuff that I want to do, like skateboard and whatnot.
Okay, perfect way to end. You don't have to do this by yourself. I love that message. So thanks a lot, Travis.
Kratom in the headlines. Hi everyone, this is Jacob, and I'm going to bring you our Kratom in the headlines segment for this week. All right, this is a international news article. It's from bazinga.com, and it's entitled Czech Senate Approves Restrictions on Sale of Kratom and HHC Products. The key points are Kratom is currently legal in the Czech Republic, but lacks proper regulation, and this amendment that was just passed is aiming to correct that issue to protect consumers and minors. I guess there was an incident with some primary school children in a area of the Czech Republic where they were poisoned with some gummies that were HHC products. I don't know much about HHC. It looks like it's an alternative THC product, but I'm sure probably listeners know more about that than I would. And then it states their goal is a strict regulation of the market. So this passed in early October, and it's headed to the president for signature. It talks about what Kratom is. It talks about the lack of conclusive scientific evidence on safety and efficacy, and it notes that there's no current regulation on the sale of Kratom. It highlights that they talked to a politician, and basically he speaks about how his 14-year-old son can basically just buy completely unregulated Kratom in a convenience store next to their apartment. So he's basically saying they want to correct that. And he's also quoted as saying, "We know repression doesn't work. That only shifts the sale of some of these substances to the black market. So what makes sense is regulation." I agree with this politician. I don't think a ban is the best way to deal with something like Kratom. I think regulation is. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the Czech Republic. They note that it's not like prohibition and criminalization. What they are planning to do is create specific stores where it will be sold. So you'll have a specific store for Kratom and I guess these HHH products. And it also has some regulations on packaging and restriction of sales and restriction of online sales. So it seems like some pretty common sense regulation to keep consumers informed of what the product is and the risks associated with the product and keep it out of the hands of minors while also simultaneously not criminalizing use and allowing for people that want to use Kratom and don't have a problem with it to do so. So interesting to see how that, new regulation will play out and maybe have implications for other countries. So that is Kratom in the headlines for this week. We hope you have a wonderful week.
Hi, everyone. This is Jasmine, and I'm bringing you the resource of the week. This week's resource is a little bit different. We are talking about social media, specifically TikTok. More and more individuals on social media and TikTok specifically are talking about their Kratom experiences. Myself, my personal TikTok has been something that I've been trying to speak out on more and more in regard to my experience with the Kava Kratom tonics, how it affected my life, what the difficulties of withdrawal were, what the recovery journey has been like. And I will say, which is not surprising, is that I get a lot of DMs from people that are struggling with the exact same thing. So I really just commend the guests that come on this podcast because they are so brave to tell their stories. And I just want everyone else to know, too, that there are so many individuals that are also just suffering in silence as well and feel as if they don't have someone to talk to. So I feel like them being able to come on social media and hopefully hear someone that has a similar story to themselves and on this podcast, too, is really uplifting and encouraging for them. And on my TikTok specifically, I really just like to talk about the very real and raw things associated with Kratom addiction, the shame that came along with it for me, how my faith has played an instrumental role in my recovery journey, and just talking about steps to recovery and ways in which that it is so far from perfect. But yeah, I just wanted to share the resource of TikTok and my TikTok page specifically, if anyone is ever interested or wants to just feel more seen and heard. That is my goal in building a community where we are taking away the taboo and the shame associated with Kratom addiction, and specifically with the Kava Kratom tonics that so many people have suffered with and have suffered through. And I just want you guys to know that you're not alone in that. My TikTok page is Jasmine, Jasmine, and then my last name, Adeoye, Adeoye_. And that's where you can find all of these topics that I'm talking about. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us this week, and keep on quitting.